Welcome to the MLS Net Boys show. Your host, Jacob, here with Chase, your source of all things MLS, all things Net Boys.
And all things Pan American Games 2023. That's right, it wasn't a bit. We're diving into it this week. Decision Day, I'm diving into the Pan American Games held in Santiago, Chile, starting 2 days ago.
I forgot that was even a bit. Like, I remember you mentioned it, and then I listened back to the podcast, and that was the extent of the talking about the Pan American Games.
Yeah, I know very little about it other than the fact that Tega Ikoba went to it, and I was just doing a little research before we started here. Yeah, it's like a weird regional Olympics thing that I don't think anybody cares about, but it's kind of cool, and I wanted to at least recognize it a little bit.
As Timbers fans, that's the most hopeful thing in our lives right now in terms of the game.
What do you mean, dude?
I don't know. I didn't watch, actually. I was listening to that podcast as well, and I just looked it up because I was trying to remember. This is episode 36, by the way. I couldn't remember. I had to look it up. And Cosmo, the LA Galaxy mascot, was on the cover. And I was telling Chase about this. Not every week, but I'll listen back. I'll listen through the podcast, and, it's kind of fun to hear about what we talked about, and it gives us new ideas and what we can do better. There's always some weird thing Chase does that makes me laugh, and I'll be in front of other people, and I gotta stop listening and just exit the room. When we were talking about Cosmo, just the LA Galaxy mascot messing with you, and how he would be annoying in an escape room or a situation, and you went boo! That was so funny because he doesn't make noise. I don't know what that came from, but it described him well.
That's exactly the sound that you would expect from Cosmo. If you were to ever see that person, that mascot, and picture it as a real thing, that's the sound it would make. Oh, man. Anyways, I don't even want to talk about this week in MLS. Let's just start our blind drafts again. Let's just go back to that.
Something a little more fun. No, we thought it'd be fun to start off with the regular season's come to a close, obviously. And the table is locked in. The playoff bracket is set. We want to go over our regular season predictions. Both the table we predicted and then also some of the regular season awards. And there's some interesting things here. I think there's a lot of misses, but some hits on here as well, I think.
A lot of misses for sure. I'm trying to see if we got any teams nailed on in their exact position. I don't think we did.
Neither of us, huh?
I'm trying to see. I got New England in 5th, actually. So I was spot on. We both had New England in 5th. Go us. But no, we kind of tallied it up before we started. In a Western Conference, I think you had 6 of the teams that made playoffs correct. Not necessarily positioning wise, and I had 5 of the teams correct in the Western Conference that made playoffs. My bottom 5 in the league, I was just so far off on for Western Conference. I had St. Louis dead last, which we both did, really far off. I had Vancouver in 13th, they were in 6th. I had Houston down in 12th, and SKC in Minnesota. That was actually pretty spot on going into the end of the season. Those two guys in 10th and 11th fighting it out.
Yeah, another one I just was looking at it. I got Nashville in 7th place. Bang on the money. So,
what's funny is I think we both, one of our biggest misses besides St. Louis is we both had Austin pretty high. I had Austin finishing top of the West. You had them in 2nd place.
I think
that's a rough one.
Those are definitely both, in the Western Conference at least, our biggest miss. I also had Portland finishing 3rd. I had the homer glasses on, I won't lie. I mean, on paper, I don't know. Looking back now, it feels really stupid, but
I was fairly close on FC Dallas. I had them at 6th. They were in 7th. San Jose in 9th. Or I had them in 7th. They ended up 9th. So, I mean, we were fairly close. Western or Eastern Conference, I think we did a little bit better on. We both had Philly, Cincy at the top. Philly not so high up there. I had Orlando finishing 3rd, which is funny with how much crap I've been giving them this past couple weeks.
You have them ahead of Columbus, actually.
Yeah. And, hey, that's where second and third, I had them as third and fourth, so not bad.
It is funny because you gravitate towards Columbus for whatever reason. I'm a big Orlando guy for whatever reason. We don't have any personal connections there at all, but
my second, third, and fourth place teams go Cincy, Orlando, Columbus. That's the first, second, and third team in that order. So if I would have just bumped those teams up one and dropped Philly down, I would have been bang on the money there. I think your other biggest miss I'm seeing right now is Toronto in third place.
Oh yeah, like I meant, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. It felt like they were primed to go. 2022, they didn't make the playoffs, but they just signed Insigne and Bernardeschi. They didn't look terrible. They looked like good additions, and they shored up the back line. They brought in an experienced coach, and then, man,
we both had Miami making it in 8th place, and that was before we even knew Messi was on the team. That's a rough.
That was pretty close, actually.
We both had New York Red Bulls missing the playoffs, which we should have known better since it's their 14th consecutive season making the playoffs now.
That's one of the big stories.
At the death.
Yeah, that was a nuts game. I'm happy. One thing I'm happy with, like you said, the East, fairly straightforward. I think we both got 7 out of the 9 playoff teams correct in the East. The West is a different story, not as correct, but I got Houston, Kansas City, and San Jose. 3 teams that were not great last year, and I got them all making the playoffs, and they did. So I remember when we started this podcast, I was big on San Jose. I was big on Houston. SKC, I don't really remember what I said, but
I was not big on SKC or Houston. San Jose I've always been a fan of. I'm a big San Jose believer, purely because of one player and one player only, Tommy Thompson.
I was going to say, you weren't a believer for San Jose when we did our mascot draft. You put Crazy George in Q at dead last.
I like Crazy George from a distance. I would not want to be trapped in a room with him while he just bangs a drum over my head. But it's kind of interesting looking back at our predictions. It'll be fun, I think, going into next season, having kind of ironed out, the first season, all the little bugs that we've had and whatnot. It'll be fun going into next year.
What's a quick storyline from this table and looking how the regular season ended? I'm curious to see St. Louis next year. I don't personally see them going super far in the playoffs. I mean, which is a dumb bet considering the season, but I want to see next year how they're doing, how figured out they'll be if they regress.
I think St. Louis is an interesting one. I think the obvious one that is going to have all the eyes on it is Miami. I saw an article today that apparently Tata Martino told Joseph Martinez he's not returning to the team next year.
And Suarez is in their plans.
Luis Suarez is supposedly joining Miami. But to me, I think some of the more interesting ones is like Houston. They've been red hot. They won the Open Cup, and it looks like they're not going to be able to hold on to Coco Carrasquilla. He's probably going to be gone, and that just kind of kills their midfield. Also, I mean, if they don't get a ton of penalties, then Amin Bassi's stats are going to look pretty terrible because that guy's his goals he's scored 9 penalties this year, and everybody's hailing him as this great goal scorer. Kind of doesn't really do anything. And then when you kind of look at some of the other teams that didn't make playoffs, Austin, how they're going to bounce back next year, that'll be interesting. Minnesota, first time looking for a new coach since they've joined MLS. I don't know. There's a lot of really interesting storylines to follow. That was a good crunch. Jacob's wife just brought him a grilled cheese, and he took a bite away from the mic, but
Panini.
The panini. Fancy grilled cheese.
With meat in it.
That's true. But I mean, there's so many teams that are going to be really fun to watch in the off season. But I think going into next year, I don't know, man. There's so many fun storylines. I think St. Louis, you hit it dead on the money. That'll be a fun one. Orlando, if they don't manage to keep a hold of Oscar Pereja, what is their team going to look like next year? Because I don't think they've signed him to a new contract yet.
Yeah. DC for me is a big one. Montreal.
That's a dead club, dude.
I
DC
feel like they
stands for dead club.
That's pretty ironic, actually. I was thinking the opposite. They have a decent academy, it feels like. They haven't been super successful, but I remember they were rumored to be in on Bale. Benteke went in for them. Like, I feel like
their big signing is going to be Kai Kamara, so they can raise their average age to like 37.
They're trying. They're swinging for the fences, but they're swinging in the wrong places. This club should be a dynasty club, right? This should be a club that's competing. For me, Montreal's curious because connection there with DC. Hernan Losada came in, didn't seem like the most convincing hire, and narrowly missed out on the playoffs.
Yeah.
Do they spend big? I don't know. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Toronto as well. I mean, seems like they're going through a rebuild. How does Charlotte build on the success they've had this year, their first ever playoff berth? Do they double down and they continue to build up, kind of like how Cincinnati did after their first playoff berth, or do they just fall back into the wooden spoon race?
That'll be a curious one as well. Last one of those, New York Red Bulls is interesting to me. Very close to missing the playoffs, and we'll talk about it more at the death.
I have one more that I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. FC Dallas is going to sell Jesus Ferreira in the offseason, and they are going to miss the playoffs next year.
Where do you think he goes? Europe?
I think he goes to some like middling European team for like a season and then comes back to the U.S.
Okay. I can see that.
He had a really good season this year, and he's the only reason they had really any sort of success. He kind of carried that team.
I feel like Dallas will churn another person out, though. I mean, we remember when Reggie Cannon left and they instantly got Brian Reynolds, and then he ended up being even better.
That's true. I don't know who they have right now to replace Jesus Ferreira.
I know his brother, and actually Ricardo Pepi's brother, is in the academy. I don't know how they're doing, but
I mean, I know they have Alan Velasco, but I don't know. They looked like such a terrible team when he didn't play this year.
I see what you mean. For me, the Red Bulls, though, are interesting because Troy Lesesne, interim head coach, got him into the playoffs, like we said, barely. Is he really that convincing, though? He was solid in the USL, but it hasn't really translated over. So you could take that a few ways. Is he not the right guy? Is the spending budget he's allowed to have not where it should be? Has he not been able to put his full authority on the squad? I don't know. Like we talked about before, Red Bulls just need the shackles off of the club. This should be one of the biggest clubs in the league. They haven't been forever. They should have a packed stadium. They should have big names there. It just doesn't feel right.
I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because I just recently found out. Do you know what the NWSL team is from that area?
Gotham, right? Something
Yeah.
Gotham?
So I was looking into them recently, and I think that would be... I actually really love the identity of their club. I'm not the biggest NWSL follower by any means, but I think that would be such a sick rebrand for New York Red Bulls. I don't know if you've seen their kits or their badge or anything, but they represent New York and New Jersey. They kind of take over both areas, and they have really cool kits. I love their badge. Really solid team. I think they would be a pretty sick. I mean, if you're not going to go back to the Metro Stars, I think that's probably the most modern version of the Metro Stars you could do.
I agree. I think incorporating that together, they play at Red Bull Arena too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a stickling point from New York City FC, but kind of lean into the New Jersey identity a little bit. I mean, they can't really say anything if they have to borrow that stadium as well for a home stadium, New York City. And yeah, wouldn't that be great? Just that weird superhero aesthetic, big city, buildings.
It kind of
Metro
fits,
Stars.
Yeah, if they went with Gotham FC or something like that, that's just so. I'd never heard of it until this week, but it's such a cool like identity for a club. It's so unique, and it plays off the whole like American superhero, like DC Comics thing. It's just I love it. I think it's really cool.
Anybody who would, the criticism I can see, which I don't agree with, is like, that's a corny thing, like that's just American and cheese, and it's not a serious league. Well, it's like, I mean, they're an energy drink like soccer team. Can you really go any worse than that?
Oh man,
unless you were like a McDonald's team. Or
I don't take anybody serious who goes to games and eats like meat pies. It's just like 50 bald white dudes who are screaming at the players. English football's a joke, dude.
We don't really have an English market, so we can say statements like this. It's more the Euro snobs who are just gonna hear that we diss the Premier League and just exit out of the podcast and never come back.
Well, this is gonna get us real off topic, and we'll go right back into MLS after this. But I hate like the snobbery of people who like watch the Prem, or like English people who think they have like the best league ever, and it's like, yeah, you might, but it's not because of your domestic talent. Like you've created the Super League, and then you like curse people who want to create the Super League within Europe, because essentially all you did is like just hoard all the best players from around the world,
destroyed the market
by just splashing a major amounts of cash, and then all your best coaches aren't even like English. They're all like from other countries, so you just are like, now you're hoarding the best coaches, and then you complain about people who want a Super League because you've already created it. It's just, I find it really simple, like just stupid when people think, oh, the Prem's the best league in the world. England is like produced the best league, and it's like they have, because they've been really intelligent with how they spent their money, not so much with how they've played their soccer. Because when you look at like traditional British soccer, it's like hoof the ball up there, 4-4-2. That's like the Sean Dyche soccer.
Big Sam.
Yeah, like just hoof the ball up to the big lad who just knocks it down, and that's it. But that was a random tangent. We haven't even talked about decision day yet, and we're tight on time today. So
that really bugs me. One last thing about that is the criticism of the Saudi League, which me or Chase are not big proponents of the Saudi League, but
after we said last week it'd be awesome to get a deal to go over there and cover them.
I mean, if the chance came. But that being said, people trashed the Saudi League because they were inflating the market and setting an unrealistic standard. It was like, dude, what has Chelsea been doing? What is the top 6 clubs, well, some of them in England, been doing this whole time? And it being decision day and going into a playoff season, and there's a lot of people online who are saying, well, yeah, teams like Portland or Minnesota or these bottom feeder teams this year who have been fighting for playoffs on the last day, like they shouldn't have even been, like, they haven't been good at all this year, so why should they have a chance this late in the season? Kind of dilutes the quality. My rebuttal to that is what you were saying. If you're watching English soccer and you're a fan of a team who's in like 13th place, you're not good enough for Europe nearly. You're definitely not going to get relegated. You've been playing meaningless soccer for like, what, 2 months?
Basically, yeah. And that's, to me, not appealing. You know, like I think when I was younger and I used to watch the Prem more, I was more so interested in it, but that was purely from just watching like the Big Six. Like I just was...
The teams who won't get relegated ever.
Yeah, like I was just mostly intrigued by watching the top teams and watching like the level of play, which still is very exciting. But I also feel like that's what the Champions League is for. I would never tune in to watch a Premier League game of like Burnley versus like Crystal Palace. I don't think anybody would ever in their right mind, unless they're like a fan of one of those two teams, or if they just like want to watch the highlights for whatever reason. I don't think anybody would ever like tune into that game.
I know some people who would actually, but I know what you're saying. It's just funny to me because, yeah, even we talked about our club Timbers 2 years in a row have been bounced on the last day of the season from the playoffs, which means in the regular season, every week they played, they had something to play for and a chance to win a trophy, whereas that's not really the case. in these other leagues.
Well, and it leads to these narratives where you see it in the Premier League now where, like, only the top 2 or 3 teams can say this, but at the very end of the season, they can look back at, like, tight games and they could say, oh, if we would have, like, if that goal would have been allowed or if this would have happened, we could be the champions. Versus you have so many teams in the league now that, like Timbers, like Montreal, a lot of these
Minnesota.
teams that are right around the edge that not just the very last game of the season, but they could look back and they could be like, if we would have just like won this game or if we would have had like better last 10-minute defending, we could have been in the playoffs and we could be pushing for the title right now.
And for me, that's one of the reasons why I like MLS. They do things like that, and it makes a lot of people say, okay, well, then the regular season's obsolete. I mean, not really. I mean, if your team has something to play for the entire year, minus a Colorado or a Toronto.
I find it more exciting. I think what really shifted my view is I started like viewing soccer as a product of entertainment that is being provided to me, and it's a lot more entertaining week on week versus when you look at the Premier League, it's more entertaining for the top few teams that are playing, depending on who they're playing. Like, it's not entertaining for me to watch Man City thrash like Burnley or some like, bottom 3 team like 7-0. That's not entertaining. Versus in MLS where these teams have something to fight for and there's no games that mean nothing. It's very exciting. But
providing a case for the best league in the world.
Yes, sir.
Hey, we're fighting battles in our own personal lives with this, defending the integrity of MLS. You'd love to see it. Anyway,
shall we dive in?
Big tangent there.
To this week's games, because there was a lot of them, and they had some implications.
Shall we cover the personal awards first?
We could run through those real quick.
We
have those pulled up, what we'd picked?
I got them pulled up. You know what's funny? Looking back at this, so personal awards, MVP, newcomer of the year, all those, etc., affect the regular season only. Obviously, so playoffs aren't factored. So now that the regular season is over, we can go over this. Dude, we didn't do Golden Boot on here.
Who won the Golden Boot this year?
Denny Bouanga.
I picked Denny Bouanga. Yeah, that's funny we missed that one.
Which is funny because we got Comeback Player of the Year, which is definitely a more obscure award.
Yeah, that one was a tough one to pick for as well. But I'll just start us off with the first one here, and I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it with your pick. For MVP, you went with Lucho Acosta. I ended up going with Brenner. For the sake of some sort of difference there. I think it's funny we both picked guys from Cincy because we knew they were going to have a good season, but we didn't pick Cincy to top Philly in the table for whatever reason.
Really interesting, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, Lucho Acosta looks like he's absolutely wrapped up the award. I think he has the most goal contributions within the league, and when you look at him playing on the best team in the league and far and above the best player on that team, kind of hard to overlook that. You have anything to say about that before we?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even really think about the fact that we both picked Cincy players and didn't pick
Cincy to win.
Yeah, and I don't know. You're a Columbus guy, so you're crossing that bridge of the rivalry. You should have picked well, good thing you didn't pick a Zelarayan, actually, because he would have left, but I guess you picked it anyway, so.
I think Cucho has a good shout at MVP from Columbus. I mean, if you were to pick somebody other than Lucho, like, take Lucho out of the equation, who do you think is, like, next up for MVP this year? It's a tough call.
Maybe Bouanga, personally. I mean, he's had a lot of games where he'll score a hat trick or a brace. It hasn't been as consistent, remember? He started out lights out, but...
And I don't think he's the one, like, X factor for LAFC so much as, like, Lucho Acosta kind of is for Cincy. I think
Brian White?
I think Cucho has a really good shout for Columbus because he's scored a boatload of goals for them, and he's been a huge, huge factor for them.
Yep. So for MVP, I said Lucho Costa. You said Brenner. Feeling pretty good there myself. Newcomer of the year, I said Stipe Buke, and you said Evander.
That's
How
tough.
would you rate each of those years? I think Buke especially explosive, exciting, fun player. Definitely not the best newcomer in the league, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would agree with that, and then I'd say Evander. Just he had his moments, but it's funny. I don't know if you've ever heard like from the extra time guys. They'll say like the David Goss theorem of like a player who didn't perform to like his full potential, but is going to be good his second year. I think Evander's going to fall into that. I could see that with Stipe Buke too. Betting into that team, he's been good this year. I think next year he'll get more minutes and he'll probably be even better. Evander, I think, just learning the league this year. He kind of didn't shine as well as he could have, but he looked way better after Miles Joseph took over. Like the second half of the season, he was way more crucial to the way we played. And I think a big part of that as well was like, unfortunately, getting Eric Williamson out of the team. Like they kind of played in the same space in a lot of ways. So having like Paredes and Chara behind him and allowing him to kind of just float wherever he wanted to helped his game a lot.
That's well said. I think for this one, the clear answer who's going to win this is Yakumakis from Atlanta. Almost was definitely in that Golden Boot race, actually. Was pretty close. So I think he's definitely the runaway option for this.
And if he wouldn't have been injured for like a quarter of the season, he probably would have absolutely ran away with the Golden Boot race.
You're right. Defender of the year, I went with Jacob Glesnes. You went with Jack Elliott. Two Philly boys. I remember talking about this in the old studio we had before we upgraded. And I don't.
Who do you think would top one of those guys? Because I don't think it's going to be either of them. Philly hasn't been convincing enough defensively.
I don't think so either. Usually in these cases, I feel like, since he's been really good defensively, so I feel like it's going to be somebody from them, maybe a Mosquera.
Matt Miazga.
I
could see Matt Miazga winning it because he's the voice of their back line. He's the leadership as well. So I could see him.
I think.
Go ahead. I'd say Robert Jansen from Orlando.
Quiet season for him, yeah. I was thinking another Cincy guy, but Alvaro Barreal, he's had a good year too, like offensive production-wise, and he's nominated. I feel like MLS does this. Whenever there's some kind of spotlight from outside of America, outside of the U.S. soccer circles, they always like hone in on that and kind of get the most publicity and recognition out there for their player. And Barreal getting looked at by the national team, scouted by Ajax, Puskas Award winner. I feel like they would give him this award because it'd be another thing on his resume that they could sell him off for. Kind of like really obscure example, a little more classic MLS from our day. 2013 Rookie of the Year was between two solid rookie fullbacks, DeAndre Yedlin and Andrew Farrell. And there was people saying that year that Farrell was a little more like of a safer fullback option to have, whereas Yedlin was starting to get looks with the national team. I don't know if he was actually yet, but he was on a lot more people's radars, and then he went to the World Cup and then moved abroad. And that was another thing he could have on his accolade that was like a notice for clubs abroad on. That's my weird MLS headquarters theory behind it.
I would agree. I was trying so hard to pull up Robin Jansen's like stats from this year, and I could not figure out how to spell his name that whole time.
Dude, I'm a big Robin Jansen guy. When I moved to Toronto FC and FM, he was like my first signing, actually.
So I think he has a good shout because he's not only been a part of like a really successful Orlando team, and he's been there for a long time, but he's also like one of the best passers in the league as a defender. I mean, when you compare his numbers to other defenders, he's top, 10%-ish or something. He has really good pass accuracy. He's got an 85% pass completion rate. For a center back, that's really solid. And to be a part of a defense that's only conceded 39 goals, same as Cincinnati. Really, really solid case for him. But
You know what's funny?
what's that?
So MLS has an article on their website. It's Joseph Lowry, and he's like predicting and kind of saying the favorites for each of these end of season awards. So you have an Orlando, second place, 39 goals allowed, great positive goal differential. Then you got like a Miami, allowed 54 goals, and obviously mid-season a bunch change. This Joseph Lowry, the journalist for MLS.com, he put as an honorable mention who he thinks should win it. He put Matt Miazga. He said Kamal Miller could win Defender of the Year. Like, dude, that's what I don't like.
That's a stupid take. That's a stupid take from a stupid person right there.
There's Chase's insult for...
That's just so like, yeah, I get it. Miami's fun and exciting, but Kamal Miller hasn't been good for Miami, and they've conceded a lot of goals even after he joined them. Like the only reason they were so good in Leagues Cup was Messi, and they were outscoring teams. Like when they get scored on, they concede a lot of goals. So he's not.
Or
that's a terrible take from that guy.
Another one was Miles Robinson, and that kind of alludes to what I was talking about. Known player, popular with the national team, is popular within U.S. soccer circles. I mean, Atlanta allowed 53 goals this season. And if you just compare that with Orlando, why wouldn't the guy who backlines that team be at a higher position? I mean, I know individual play comes into it a lot, but
I don't know. That would be my pick for Defender of the Year, to be Robin Janssen. But moving on, though, for Goalkeeper of the Year, kind of funny. I mean, I think so. You picked Petrovic, who got sold, and I think he played too few minutes to really be considered. I picked Pedro Gallese, who's recently in the headlines. His national team of Peru was playing against Argentina, and a kid jumps on the field to try and get a picture with Messi, and as he's running, he gets tackled, and Gallese comes over and grabs the kid's phone from him and just chucks it off the field. Just absolutely shows no remorse for him. I think he had a good season. I don't think he's up there for top 3, I would even say. Petrovic, if he would have stayed for the full season, probably would have been a shoo-in. I think the obvious contender, though, is Ramon Berkey with St. Louis. I think he has like one of the best save percentages in the league. Absolutely saved St. Louis on many occasions this year. With the style they play, they need a goalkeeper that's locked in and can pull out saves that just out of nowhere. So, and I think with their success, you can't really overlook. Looking just at his stats right now, save percentage, he's at a 79% save percentage. That's top 14% in the league. Post expected goals or assist save percentage. It's kind of a weird stat, but essentially it's when the expected goals are so high that he shouldn't be saving that. He's in the top 9% of the league. Defensive actions outside the penalty area, he pulls off 1.7 per 90, so top 10% in the league. He's just, when you look across all his stats, he's in the top 10% for all the most important ones. So it's kind of hard to dismiss him for Keeper of the Year.
I think you're right. I think that's the clear and obvious one. Before we advance, though, I was looking at Barreal before I get called a casual, going back to our last one. He's been playing like on the left side on like a 3-5-2. So certain places have him listed as more of a midfielder. I know Arias is definitely considered a fullback on the other side. So
it's weird because I feel like you never see outside backs get picked for Defender of the Year, even though they technically are defenders. But if you open it up to them, I feel like you can almost include like defensive midfielders at that point, and I would pick Nwobodo from Cincy at that point because he's been amazing for them defensively. But
the next Diego Chara,
without a doubt.
Petrovic, though,
really good.
Who you mentioned I picked for Goalkeeper of the Year, obviously transferred out. Should that guy be starting for Chelsea? Did you see that Robert Sanchez howler against Arsenal the other day?
He might get his chance. I think I said this when he got his, signed by Chelsea. I think he'll get a chance. I don't think Sanchez is that great of a goalie. So I think Petrovic might get a shot there.
Even the Mickey Mouse goalkeeper, though.
Works part-time at McDonald's. Moving on, we got Coach of the Year. Jacob went with Pat Noonan, who I think has a great shout at the award. I went with Oscar Pereja, who I think is probably in that, if you were to rank them, probably like that B tier or A tier, if you were to put Pat Noonan up there in that S tier. I think who's going to win it is probably going to be Bradley Carnell with St. Louis. Just the narrative around their team this year, it's kind of hard to overlook everything he did. I personally feel like Pat Noonan deserves it. I think he did more work, and I think he had a harder job ahead of him, especially with how strong the Eastern Conference is.
You know what's interesting to me is I agree with everything you said. I went Pat Noonan, and yeah, I think Carnell should get it personally. Last year, however, since he was that first year they turned it around and made the playoffs and won a game, Pat Noonan didn't win it last year. I was thinking he did. It went to Jim Curtin last year, and that just is dumb to me because once again, it feels like MLS is like overinflating their own product because Philly didn't win. They didn't win anything.
Yeah.
They lost the Shield. They lost in Champions League. They lost the MLS Cup.
But the counterpoint to that is they were there, and Cincy wasn't there at all last year. They turned around a bad team, but they didn't win anything.
I agree. They were there, but if you're basing it off of that, why wouldn't you give it to Cherundolo from LAFC? Because he actually won. That was
the thing. A lot of people said Cherundolo deserved it over Jim Curtin.
And it just doesn't make sense because Philly last year before were very close to MLS Cup, whereas LAFC the year before weren't.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the people who vote on these...
It's Noah Beck and a bunch of just random people.
I think there's a lot of recency bias that goes into it for people.
I'm just trying to... This makes no sense because there isn't. I'm just trying to play it by their own logic because I don't see the consistency with these.
And it's hard because it's completely subjective. There's no... The only thing you can really measure it by is trophies, and I think they try and stray away from that because it'd be boring if you just picked players and coaches from the teams that won trophies. But yeah, I think Bradley Carnell probably has the best shout this year. I think he has a good shout at it, but I think Pat Noonan deserves it from... It's hard because if you base it just off this year, yeah, he had an amazing season, but if you base it off his whole time as head coach of Cincy and what he's done to that whole club, I think he absolutely deserves it. Next up, this is a nothing award that nobody cares about. Comeback Player of the Year.
This is the one we had instead of Golden Boot, actually.
Yeah, this is... I don't know why, because it's just such a weird, obscure award that I don't fully understand the parameters of. Like, I know it can kind of apply to guys who were, like, injured and came back and had a good season. I don't know. You picked João Paulo, who's come back, hasn't really been the same João Paulo. I picked Miles Robinson, came back. He was all right. I couldn't name you another player that would even be considered for this award.
Yeah, and you know the funny thing is I'm looking again at this article where Joseph Lowry from MLSsoccer.com awards these. He's got Miles Robinson winning this. And he does like one pick for each thing and then gives a couple honorable mentions. So he's got Robin Jansen as another one, Keaton Parks and Alan Pulido, which I think are all decent picks. Miles Robinson's played a ton this year, 2,000 plus minutes. He's been solid, but this whole overall list, he's got all these end-of-season awards. He's picked 3 Atlanta players, Yakumakis, Thiago Almada, and Miles Robinson. Atlanta didn't have that great of a year. They're 6th place.
Seems a little biased, if you ask me.
That's what I'm saying. Atlanta's a big club in MLS, and it feels like they're just throwing these things on. So they know Almada's going to leave. And they can say one more thing. It's like, oh, he was the reigning MLS Young Player of the Year. So that's another way our name gets mentioned. I'm just a tinfoil hat guy, but I don't think Miles Robinson is the best comeback player of the year. I think this one specifically, I think he's got a good shout for it. But Robin Jansen, maybe. I mean, Alan Pulido missed most of last season, and he was in the Golden Boot race. I think that's a much more better one.
I think, yeah, I would agree. Alan Pulido has a good shout at it. I'm trying to look at the list of nominees they have for comeback player of the year. So, looking down the list, Brad Guzan, I don't think he has a chance. Robin Janssen is on the list. Felipe Mora, good shout. Jonathan Osorio, Keaton Parks, João Paulo, Alan Pulido, Miles Robinson's there, Brad Smith, Ashley Westwood, Bobby Wood. There really isn't any better options, I think, than Miles Robinson. Alan Pulido, I think, has a really good shout. I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't know the exact qualifications. I mean, they're supposed to show improved performance. You could pick anybody from St. Louis that got picked up from another team. Giacchini, Adeniran, like any of those guys that got picked up from other teams, they could be on this list.
Yeah, if I recall right, reading the qualification for it, it was kind of subjective. So
they had to. It's a player who's overcome a severe injury and or adversity, and as a result missed a significant portion of the 2022 season.
For me, it's got to be Pulido.
I would say Pulido, but you could also say everybody on St. Louis missed half of last season because none of them played.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one for me.
Yeah, I would say Alan Pulido is a solid shout, but I don't know. That's just such a nothing award for me that I don't really think anybody actually cares about. That's like one of those things that you give to like a team like when they've already missed out on playoffs and they get to post it on their like social media or something.
Congratulations to Felipe Mora for winning. That's the guy who should be nominated.
He is nominated. He's on the list of nominees. Okay. And he deserves it because
he missed like the last two seasons.
He kind of helped turn our team around actually when he came back this year. Moving on to the last award, we have Young Player of the Year. You went with Alan Velasco, who I think is a much better shout than mine of Juan Mascara from the Timbers. Oh, man. It's just Juan Mascara showed so much promise, but I think he's
a bright mid. We'll get to the game, but
he's a really good defender. Or he's a really good young prospect. I think he just wasn't used very well by Gio Savarese. I think he could have been used a lot better.
See, I was reading an interesting thing, and offensively, he's pretty good. I mean, he hasn't had like a ton of like offensive output in terms of goals and assists, but he's pretty involved in attacks and watching. And we passed the eye test, and somebody brought this up on Twitter. When the Timbers, throughout this run before they crashed out of playoffs, were winning games, when Eric Miller started, their defense was a lot more calm and persistent because they had pretty much a stay-at-home fullback on that side. And when you have two fullbacks who are pushing up and down constantly and they're not sliding over to cover, they're just getting exposed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even think he's on the list of nominees actually. When you look at it, but he is on the list of nominees. But who do you think outside of our shouts? I think the clear and obvious one is probably Thiago Almada. He's actually still eligible. He's just barely eligible. And to your point of like he's going to be leaving the league, they need to give him some award. So I think he's the clear and obvious. But if we were to pick like a real one that's not Thiago Almada because he's just absolutely insane, who do you think? There's a lot of good options. I could kind of read some names off the list if you want.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to hear him actually.
So we got Mateus Bogusz from LAFC. You got Chris Brady, who had an amazing season for Chicago. Noel Buck, who is so lights out with New England that even the England national team is trying to get him called up. Cade Cowell, who just runs. Benjamin Kremashki, who I think is a really strong prospect. Facundo Farias. Kind of silly because He joined halfway through the season. You got Aziel Jackson with St. Louis, Ted Pietro with DC, Diego Luna, who you would let your daughter date, Jack McGlynn with Philly, Duncan McGuire, who's barely at the cutoff, won't be old enough next year. He'll be too old. Aiden Morris with Columbus, Yerson Mosquera with Cincy.
I was thinking Mosquera would be a good one.
Who else?
Obviously, Almada's got it. John Tolkien. I don't know if he's nominated.
John
but
Tolkien's on there. Caleb Wiley as well. Pedro Vite.
I don't want to give it another Atlanta player some award that they don't really deserve. I think Almada earned this one. If not him, I'd say maybe John Tolkien.
What about Darren Yappy, dude? Show Colorado. Show them a little bit of love, you know? But, yeah, I don't know. Thiago Almada is the obvious winner, but it's fun to highlight some of these other guys in the seasons they've had. Like Ted Pietro, I think, is a super talented player that won't get any real recognition until he leaves DC, because DC is so bad.
You're right. Running back the list, here's who I think should have gotten it. MVP, Thiago Almada. Newcomer of the Year, Giorgio Yakumakis.
You put Almada at MVP?
Yep. Defender of the Year, Miles Robinson. Goalkeeper of the Year, Brad Guzan. Coach of the Year, Gonzalo Pineda. Comeback Player of the Year, Miles Robinson. And then Young Player of the Year, the combo of Caleb Wiley and Thiago Almada.
So mine's actually just Thiago Almada.
It sounds like when you say a word so much and it just doesn't sound like a real word anymore.
Trying to see, there's some of these other awards that
like how Messi is nominated for like MVP after playing.
There's some of these other awards that we didn't even predict, like MLS Referee of the Year nominee. Who do you got?
Ted Uncle, man.
Ted Uncle.
Is he on there?
John Freeman, Victor Rivas, and Ted Uncle are the only three. How about Assistant Referee of the Year?
Dude, that's a good one.
I'm going with Ian McKay.
Dude, not Cam Blanchard. Dude, what about the big one? The Audi Goals, Drives, Progress, Impact Award.
I was just about to say that one because it's so...
I'm seeing names on this list. I didn't even know we're in the league still. Steven Betashore.
So this award recognizes players who demonstrate excellence in driving progress in their communities.
Josh Yarrow. I forgot he was in the league. Victor Ulloa from Miami. I remember him at Dallas. The corpse of Graham Zusi still doing stuff in the community. Alec Kahn, former Atlanta goalkeeper.
I love that these awards are like a mix of like being named after like league legends, like honoring them, and then you have sponsors. Like you have the Landon Donovan MLS MVP, All-State MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, the Siggy Schmidt Coach of the Year, and then you have the Audi player who drives the most change, or I don't know. I love that it's like a weird mix.
They got to get like a good referee award sponsorship. The MLS Referee of the Year presented by Simon Borg.
The Instant Replay Referee of the Year. Oh, man. Well, that is this season in MLS.
Let's talk about 15 games now.
I know. I was going to say we got
to blow through this.
We got about 40 minutes left. We got some time to run through the most important week of games in the whole entire year after we complained about the Premier League for an hour. Anyways, shall we just dive right in? First game, Charlotte FC beating Inter Miami 1-0.
Exciting game.
Kerwin Vargas scoring a goal in the 13th minute. Haven't heard that name very much this season.
Did you watch this? Huge crowd in Charlotte. 66,000. I mean, a lot were to see Messi probably.
And they went absolutely nuts after the game ended, making their first like berth into the playoffs, just barely.
I'm going to take that statement back, actually. Not there to see Messi, because if you looked and watched this game, it wasn't like
all Charlotte fans.
It wasn't a pink out like in Chicago or like some of those other environments. Not really Chicago either. What's a good example? Like Philly. When they played Philly.
Yeah. You know what I thought was funny? I was thinking about when I saw, like, so they made playoffs. Their fans are just going absolutely nuts. They're throwing drinks, just absolute limbs. And it's just like people are freaking out. I was like, imagine we just still had last year's playoff structure and they were reacting this way to getting like 9th place and missing playoffs. Just like, I was just cracking up thinking about like, if 9th place didn't make playoffs and they were just reacting like this after like a last game of the season game that meant nothing.
You know what's funny about that to me? Weren't you with all your family, like at a family gathering? So you're just watching on your phone, just cracking up to yourself, just thinking about this?
We were at my dad's birthday, and we had like family friends from California. We had like his best friends that he's been friends with forever, and we were just like basically my godparents, and we're all just kind of all there spending time together, and I'm just cracking up thinking about the mediocrity of Charlotte fandom.
Playoff team, though.
They are a playoff team, which is far better than my team.
MVP has got to be their goalkeeper, Kalina. Did you see all those nuts saves he was making? 90th minute, stoppage time, stopping free kicks from Messi, from tight angles. Like,
that's why he's a DP, man.
He had one of those. He had like a glancing header save from Campagna right at the death. And it's funny because you can watch the game or like the highlights and you'll just hear Taylor Twellman like freaking out. It's funny to me when commentators kind of like break character, and instead of like reacting in like a professional way, Taylor Twellman was like, "Oh!" Just like a fan of the game. Sorry for your headphones if you heard that on full volume, but
I love that.
Charlotte makes the playoffs. Messi ends the season playing on turf too, which is kind of notable actually. A lot of people think he would miss these sort of games, but
yeah, he came out and said that he's willing to play on turf. So I was trying to do the math and see if I'd be able to watch him in Portland next year, and I think we might get a home game against Miami. We didn't play them this year, and we played them away the year before. But I think there's going to be some tomfoolery with the schedule this year. They're
going to give them LAFC again. You already know.
Yeah, they're going to maximize ticket sales. I was debating this with somebody the other day. If they come to Portland, do you think they play the game in Providence Park, or do they move it to like Reser Stadium or Autzen Stadium to try and maximize ticket sales?
I think they play it at home still. I think
that's what I was thinking, unless the league steps in and like forces them to like find a bigger venue to just pack out fans, because they would sell out Reser Stadium, or like they would go from selling 28,000 tickets to selling like 50,000 tickets.
You're right. I think we haven't seen like they played at Cincy, they played at Nashville, and especially for Nashville with the Leagues Cup final, I feel like a game like that was the game to do it, honestly. Or like Miami hosting the U.S. Open final.
Yeah.
Yet they didn't for either of those. So I think they'll play them at their normal stadiums, personally.
That was my thought. I just thought it would be interesting to see if they would like bend the rules even more for this Miami team.
I'd be curious for like San Jose does that when they play the LA Galaxy. They move to Stanford Stadium, and it's like 2.5 times the capacity.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see Timbers play a home game in Eugene or Corvallis, where normally up in Seattle they have like 50,000 plus fans on their side, but to have the inverse would be really curious to me.
It would be interesting watching the Timbers play a home game somewhere other than Providence Park, because I don't think they have in like 50 years. They've always played at Providence Park, so that would be really interesting to watch. It was funny. I was like who I was talking with about it was saying like, yeah, I don't think people are going to want to travel that far. And I was like, I think anybody would travel that far to go watch Timbers play against like Messi and co, essentially. And just, I mean, Eugene and Corvallis are good population hubs in their own. I think you would get a lot of people traveling the hour or 2 hours to go watch the Timbers play.
I just drove back from the Oregon coast, actually, and you kind of pass the Corvallis area, depending on the way you go. Picturing Messi being in that part of like
world.
Corvallis, Oregon.
Imagine that. Yeah, that's really funny to think about. Like, I've thought about it in the past when like Frank Lampard and like David Villa and those guys came to the league and they were like in Portland, or like when Bayern Munich came and they're in Portland. It's just weird to think about like these global superstars that are like very well recognized, and then to think of like Messi, who's like the greatest soccer player of all time behind Julian Gressel, and is just so well known around the world.
In the same state as our friend Ben.
Just to think, like, imagine him just riding on his team bus through Corvallis, and it's just a bunch of frat dudes. Like, that's so funny to think about. But anyways, we got sidetracked yet again.
Charlotte going to the playoffs.
That was our first game, our first game of coverage. Anyways, next up we got FC Cincinnati tying Atlanta United 2-2. This doesn't really do much for playoff seeding, but FC Cincinnati finding a way yet again through Lucho Acosta getting a goal right on the brink of halftime. Giacomakis sealing the Golden Boot with 2 goals. Yeah, solid 2-2 tie between these teams.
I think the most notable thing is Atlanta's going to be missing Almada now, actually. And Bawanga actually got the Golden Boot.
That's right.
Giacomakis close behind. But
like 17 goals to 18 or 19, something like that.
Bawanga got 20 by the end. He scored, actually.
It was close.
Pretty close, yeah. Point apiece, though. Wrapping into playoffs, that makes a nice... Cincy obviously had the top spot, so they'll play the wild card match. Winner of Charlotte and New York Red Bulls. But Atlanta and Columbus is the matchup in the East, which is looking like a nice matchup. So moving on, we got Columbus hosting Montreal.
Columbus Crew doing the work. Giving up a goal early, want to give Montreal a little bit of hope. And then the 2 stars, Cucho Hernandez, Darlington Nagbe, both bagging goals to win 2-1 against Montreal. Montreal is absolutely horrible on the road. If they would have gone into the playoffs, like squeaked in, they would have been easily a first-round exit. They've only won 2 games on the road all year. So
they would have won in Portland, too.
Not surprising they go to Columbus and they can't get the job done at Lower.com Field, the fortress of the Columbus Crew.
Host of your 2024 MLS All-Star Game. Yeah, Columbus makes it. Montreal loses out in heartbreaking fashion because they needed a result there to kind of control their own destiny. They were up in this game, ended up losing, and we're alive, actually, with a loss still up until the last couple minutes of New York Red Bulls versus Nashville, which we will get into.
That's it. Next up, though, next game. I don't know if there's much else to talk about with Columbus. Columbus is the best team in the East. Moving on, we got New York City FC beating Chicago Fire 1-0. Both these teams missed the playoffs. Sucks to be a sellout club that is affiliated with, I don't even know who they're affiliated with. City Football Group. I don't even remember what country owns them.
It's not Saudi, is it? Or is
Saudi or Qatar or one of those Middle Eastern countries, I think.
What's the guy's name who owns all of that, who went to his first Man City game in like a long time when he went to the Champions League final?
I'm looking it up right now.
What do you think it takes that guy?
Abu Dhabi United Group. I don't know the name of the guy.
That chair owner, that main guy who's been to 2 Man City games in like 15 years. What do you think it takes him to go to a New York City FC home game? Or just game in general?
Sheikh Mansour.
That's who he is.
Imagine he just shows up to every game and he's like there with the ultras.
And he's like
all 5 of them.
Popcorn and a Yankees hat on, just stuck in.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
He's got a Yankees hat on, but they're playing at the Met Stadium. I think it's funny they trade between baseball stadiums.
They were playing there this weekend, I believe. So
I think that's hilarious. Anyways, both those teams missed out on playoffs. I don't really care to talk about either of them, honestly.
Same here. Nashville hosting the New York Red Bulls. This had some drama in it. Like we were mentioning with Montreal, this was a result that New York Red Bulls were in control of their own destiny in a way and got a win late into stoppage time which gave them the 3 points, put them into the playoff picture. They were on the outside looking in, kicks Montreal out, who Montreal's coaching staff was watching on an iPad after their own game had ended, and you could see live their reaction to being knocked out. But 14 seasons, a league record, 14 years in a row being in the playoffs.
Must be nice. Must give you some sort of hope rather than making a deep run and then not winning a single away game the next year. No, absolutely amazing accomplishment for New York Red Bulls. I mean, barely squeaking in with literally like one of the last kicks of their season.
You know what's crazy? They've made the playoffs 14 years in a row. 14 years is longer than Atlanta, Austin, Charlotte, Cincinnati, LAFC, Inter Miami, Minnesota, Montreal, Nashville, New York City FC, Orlando, Philadelphia, Portland, San Diego now, St. Louis, and Vancouver have been in the league.
How many more cups have they won than those teams?
0. 3 shields, actually.
You know, what would you take? Would you take that, or would you take the Timbers' record of 3 MLS Cups in a shorter time frame and 1 MLS Cup win, and barely missing out on a supporter shield to the New York Red Bulls?
I would take the cup.
I would too. You know, I was thinking about that recently. The Timbers were like extremely close to winning a supporter shield, and the New York Red Bulls squeezed it away from us like last day of the season, right?
It was 2013.
Thierry Henry
won the shield for them at home against the Chicago Fire. That's some lore for you.
5-2 win.
The only other time...
4. It was like some weird high-scoring game.
It was like 5... Yeah, 5-2, I think.
That was a deep pull from us. Moving on, though. I mean, do you have anything else to say about New York? Gotham FC?
No.
We should just start referring them as Gotham FC.
See if we can get a change going. Isn't that the women's team name, though?
Yeah, dude. So we're talking about the top of the show, man.
But, no, I know, but they would just have the same exact name? How would you spin it?
How would you change it? That's like DC. What's like a Marvel city?
Because Gotham's Batman, right?
Yeah.
For me...
Superman's home planet.
Krypton? Is that
Krypton FC.
Dude, it's gotta be Metro Stars for me, because they work together. If you were to kind of brand it together, they could be like sister clubs. But if they're gonna ditch this is off topic, but if they're gonna ditch the Red Bull Monarch, I don't know why Monarch isn't a word. I meant gimmick. They gotta go Metro Stars.
I looked up a list of towns from comic books, and Gotham was there. I don't recognize any of these other ones. There's Dingberg.
That sounds like something Brian Schmetzer would call the Timbers, dude.
That's such a good old man insult.
You Dingberg.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was talking to the mayor of Dingberg. Oh, there's Gooseville, Gotham City, Hoot and Holler.
All these sound like Brian Schmetzer, just little quips.
Junktown. Oh, man. Clow. Kryptonopolis. That's a good one. Oh, my goodness. How do you even pronounce that? Anyways.
A little bit off base here.
Yeah, I think Gotham FC, just marry them together, kind of like you have in Europe. It's just like Arsenal women's, Arsenal men's, one super club. Oh, man.
New England Revolution hosting the Philadelphia Union. Another matchup where it's the decision day matchup that's going to carry into playoffs. So New England wins 2-1 over Philly. It was the Gustavo Bo show. And Carranza gets Philly up 1-0. Gustavo Bo gets a brace. One of them was a PK. But, I mean, it's funny. We did our bracket. Both of us took Philly over New England. Here, though,
Gustavo Bo is such a roller coaster of a player anymore. I don't think he's going to carry that into the playoffs.
He seems like a like some random MLS team's gonna buy him, like a Kansas City or like a Houston or Rapids. Some team like that's gonna buy him, and he's gonna be like mid-level. DC United, I can see getting a player like this.
I would feel so bad for Gustavo Bo if he went to DC United.
Well, I mean, he was at a successful team, and then they blew up the whole coach and roster, and
yeah,
not really the roster, I guess, but
Timbers, pick him up. He could be the Nias Goda replacement. Yeah, New England Revolution, Philly. It's going to be interesting because this is essentially like a 4-game series now, because next time they play, we'll be in that first round of playoffs, so it's going to be a 3-game series. So they're about to play each other 4 times in a row. Starting to feel like it's LAFC versus Philly, where they just play nonstop. So
you're right, and I don't know. I have my own feelings about that, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch. Toronto FC hosting Orlando City, and Orlando wins 2-0.
Getting dunked on.
Big Duncan McGuire is heating up, scoring some bangers. But the big news is around the general.
Michael Bradley has announced his retirement.
Didn't really give anybody much time to plan a whole lot. Honestly, he announced this 4 days ago, in between our last episode, so we couldn't even.
If you were him, would you retire after this season, having gone so poorly, or would you try and go somewhere else to get one last good season in before you leave?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear he's lost a step. I mean, if I was him, I wish I would take a lesser contract, be on a minimum year, because he talks about open, he loves the game. And Sasa Kleshin was talking about this on the MLS 360 show, and saying a lot of players have the wrong mentality where it's this isn't just work. I got to go and play soccer for a living, right? It's enjoyable every time I do it, even if I lose. And Bradley had that mentality. So I feel if I was in his shoes, I would play on a min contract or something, help my team open up some space, and kind of regress into more of a substitute bench, kind of like a player coach role almost, and kind of ease out. Because, even in this last game, he got destroyed this year.
It's tough because that does sound appealing, but also it's with Toronto. So, and maybe he sees the writing on the wall. I don't think Toronto is going to get that much better that quick. So maybe he sees the writing on the wall and he's like, I'm just going to get out of here, and he's going to pull a Landon Donovan and then come out of retirement to play indoor soccer and then go to Mexico.
Play in the Canadian Premier League instead.
But it's not like he can get a move anywhere in MLS, because I think that would just kill his reputation with Toronto.
You think so? I think unless he went to Montreal, it would be.
I don't know. I think right now where he stands, Toronto, they should build a statue of him. He's probably their most important player, I'd say, in their history besides Giovinco, but he's had a longer tenure at the club than Giovinco.
6 years after him, yeah. So and a year before.
So I think he deserves he deserves a statue or something for that club.
Definitely agree.
But I think he's at the point where he probably realizes Toronto's not getting much better, and if he were to just kind of stay on the books, even if it was a min contract, how enjoyable is that really gonna be?
I think it's more for the leadership aspect, honestly.
And that's true, but Toronto's kind of well documented of just being in absolute disarray. Their locker room is just in shambles, and do you really want to I know it is still not a real job, but going into a locker room that's kind of split and divided and toxic, do you want to be there every day, or would you rather retire and go and enjoy your family while you're still pretty young?
Time for Jonathan Osorio to fill those boots. Fill those boots, step up to the plate, get those Italians in line, man.
Just whip them into shape. But from one eliminated team to another, we got the Colorado Rapids losing to RSL 1-0. We didn't even talk about that game, actually. We should go back. Orlando and Toronto. You have anything else to say about that before we move on?
I mean, no.
It's a bummer. I mean, I'm really bummed seeing Bradley go out on this note because he's one of my favorite U.S. men's national team players. Such an amazing career. Going to Europe, being a crucial piece for teams over there, coming back, not just like American soccer, but influencing like Canadian soccer in the way he did. So
CONCACAF legend.
Without a doubt. I mean, arguably most memorable moment, chipping Ochoa at the Azteca in Mexico.
That's like a top 5. That's like a top 3 U.S. soccer moment ever for me.
That's an amazing memory. But yeah, absolutely a legend.
A lot of these more, I don't want to sound like a gatekeeper of like U.S. soccer or the game, but a lot of more recent fans have a pretty sour opinion of him, unfortunately, because of the whole Trinidad and Tobago, but he was a legend for a long time. So I think we can move on, though. Rapids hosting Salt Lake. Salt Lake beats Colorado Rapids 1-0. Diego Luna with a goal. Did you see the banner that the Salt Lake supporters had?
No, I didn't.
They pretty much had a sign that their away supporters group had, and it said, like, our biggest rival deserves better. And it was like, it had to do with that whole statement the Rapids supporters group had about, like, stadium and spending and just influence from their owner being all, like, not where it should be. So I think that was kind of a cool moment, actually.
That is pretty cool. Seeing RSL kind of stand in solidarity with Rapids fans.
And then the funny thing to me is the admin on their social media. A lot of these MLS social media accounts are unhinged. Salt Lake has had an unhinged one for a while now, but I forget what they posted, but a lot of Salt Lake or MLS fans, when they're talking about Colorado, they put Crapids because it's C Rapids, and the RSL like Twitter account just posted like Crapids are gonna crapid or something like that when they lost. They're like typical Crapids. Like, man, you got the fans like having this kind of nice moment with, you know, their
then
rivals.
You just step right back in and just dunk on them. Oh man, yeah, I don't know. It's another Rocky Mountain Cup in the books. What can you say?
Salt Lake has won the last 4 games. Feeling a little.
Rapids are so bad, dude. So our family friends that were over yesterday.
Don't tell me they're Rapids fans.
So they're from California, and one of them, he's from Colorado. Doesn't follow soccer at all. But like while he was there, he was watching their hockey team play, and he was asking me, he's like the Rapids, like how are they doing? And I was like, oh yeah, they're like one of the worst teams in the league. And he's like, they used to be pretty good, right? And I was like, they had like a good season or so, but
a good season for every 4 bottom feeder years.
Yeah, it was funny because like he obviously didn't really keep up with it too closely, but like enough to know like they used to be pretty good, and like I know they're not doing that good now, but yeah, obviously they deserve better. Kind of funny, I'm reading MLS website about this game right now, and they say they spelled Chicho Arango's name wrong. Chicho Arnago.
Dude, they don't care. It's not Miami or LFC.
Oh, man. Moving on, we got SKC against Minnesota. One of the most important games of Decision Day. And SKC just puts the beat down on Minnesota. 3-1. They go up 3-0 in the 78th minute. Michael Boxall gets a consolation goal in the 82nd. Kind of seems similar to the Timbers game.
It seems like some similar fate. Kansas City making the playoffs after getting 3 points. So 3 draws out of their first 10 games, no wins.
I predicted this like weeks ago that Peter Vermees was going to do just enough to keep his job. He's going to barely squeak into the playoffs, lose in the first round, and then keep his job for another year.
Let's run it back.
I don't remember what episode it was, but it was like a few weeks ago we were talking about it.
We talked about this because you said we talked about how he'd be talking to his wife in the morning over a cup of coffee, like, you know, I got one more season in me. And, you know, there was some hostile fan opinion. I think there still are. I think a lot of fans are ready for a new era there. And
if he goes for one more year, I think he'll be at 15 years with that club in charge. Like he's been there as long as New York Red Bulls have been making the playoffs. Imagine if he leaves and they just don't make the playoffs anymore.
I would like
Like a weird connection.
it's like a time vortex thing. Yeah, huge for Kansas City. I don't see them going super far, but still a cool accomplishment for them.
He's like their Sir Alex Ferguson, except way less success.
Do you think that one clip that always goes around of Sir Alex Ferguson's last game, and he gets like the guard of honor and like all the stadium's waving all their things, like a festive atmosphere? You think PV gets that in Kansas City? A regular season game against like the Rapids or DC United.
When they're already eliminated from playoff contention.
You got them both lined up on either side. You got Benteke just applauding.
It'd be even more fitting if it was just like a Chicago or like just one of those crap teams. Like,
dude, Chicago's minding their own business right now, and you just brought them up out of nowhere. That is disrespectful.
Oh, gosh. That's so funny. Yeah, Peter Vermees, I don't even know where he goes after SKC. You remember when he was linked with the U.S. job? Before Greg Berhalter got it, it was like him, Berhalter, and Caleb Porter were kind of like the three domestic products that were being linked with it.
I mean, I'm a Berhalter defender, honestly, and if you look at their MLS resume, Vermees had a better track record, honestly. So
PV?
yeah, I don't want him, but if that's what we were going off of.
You don't want him to coach the national team for the next 6 World Cup cycles?
Oh, man. Dude, he's looked exactly the same, too. He is not aged. I mean, he's not like a young man, but he's been the same, dude. Dude, that means he was back at SKC when... Do you remember that legendary Graham Zusi goal? It was in like 2010 in an empty FC Dallas stadium at Pizza Hut Park, and he just roofs in a free kick from like 55 yards.
Looking at pictures of him right now, I know what you're talking about. He just looks like he's always chewing gum. Like if you just look at him, like it looks like he's always just got a fat wad of gum in his mouth.
It's all that stress from dude. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a hater of Kansas City by any means, but there's some. I almost don't want him to retire or leave because it's like the end of an era of like MLS, not just Kansas City. When I think Kansas City, I think Peter Vermees, I think Baby Blue Kits, I think Graham Zusi, and I think of Matt Beasler. Matt Beasler's gone. That's one of the four horsemen out of the equation. So
when you're thinking of that team specifically, I always think of Ike Opara when I think of like prime SKC.
When they had those like golf shirt looking kits with the polo and the...
Yeah.
I think that's a well-run club in general, but...
Peter Vermees has never had facial hair in his life.
That's really weird. Next up, LA Galaxy versus FC Dallas. Another game I would have preferred a favor from the Galaxy. They lose 4-1 at home. This is the score at halftime, too. It's just Dallas put the beat down on them. Dallas advances to the playoffs and are in the wild card game. No, they're not actually. They're in 7th place, so they're playing Seattle first round. Galaxy ends a pretty terrible year for them. And we've talked about Greg Van, and we've talked about a lot of things. Is this Ricky Puig's last game? What's your takeaway from this?
I don't know. I mean, Ricky Puig, I don't think he should stay with LA Galaxy if he were smart. I want him to stay in the league. I don't think LA Galaxy is going to get better very soon. I think best case scenario, they squeak into the playoffs next year, unless they have some insane offseason. I don't know. FC Dallas, though, looking good. LA Galaxy, they have a lot of work to do. I think it's almost like a relief for them to finally have an end to their season, so they don't have to worry about anything. They can just start finally developing their squad.
There's just a lot on this roster that I mean, it was a more rotated squad. They were already eliminated, but Jonathan Bond, not really that convincing as a goalkeeper. Tony Alfaro, this guy's been passed around from DC United and didn't really do too hot at Chivas. Yoshida was a decent pickup. Kevin Leerdam, not the best, starting defender in the league. Fagundes is an all right piece. I mean, I don't know.
Fagundes was a good pickup for them. I like the Fagundes pickup.
When your best part of the season and most, inspiring and, awe-inspiring part of the team was a 37-year-old Billy Sharp scoring like a hat trick against Minnesota. Like,
it's rough. That's a rough look.
It's rough. And, I mean, you could say the same about some of these eliminated teams. I'm really curious to see the off-season for LA Galaxy specifically, because like we talked about, they're a big club. Like, they should have big name. They should be successful. They should have a packed stadium. There's no reason for them to be a bottom feeder team.
Absolutely. Just super disappointing, and I feel for their fans.
Speaking of disappointing, Portland Timbers, our beloved squad, hosted Houston Dynamo. Decision day matchup, and needed a point out of the last two games for Portland to make the playoffs. They lose the last two, and they lose the last game of the season 3-1, 2 years in a row. Miss out on the playoffs.
What are we doing? What are we doing? I was so primed to go on like a Taylor Twellman rant about this team, because it's just a joke, man.
Griffin Dorsey was the Grim Reaper in this game. How many times are the Timbers going to make these random MLS?
Just random, like both times we played Houston. First it was like Corey Baird. We just let him do the freaking crab dance on us, and then we get
Brad Smith scoring bangers on us.
And then we let Griffin Dorsey like just put in a very well placed header, but like absolutely uncontested. For the first goal, and then we just looked like we were absolutely like shell shocked after that.
We looked like a JV team, just the way our midfield got.
It was rough,
destroyed by.
It was pretty brutal to watch. Only positive is Timbers get to just focus solely on like the head coach search and the roster build now, which it's so tough because. I might be a little biased as a Timbers fan. I feel like the roster hasn't been in a terrible place for the past few seasons, other than the need of like a lights out center back. But every year we just underperform so badly.
And I definitely agree. You look at the MLS Cup roster Portland had a few years back. There's a lot of the same players on this list, and I don't think we should be winning a trophy every year, but we should be making playoffs. We shouldn't be depending on a San Jose Austin game in the last few minutes to decide if we go to the playoffs. It's not good enough. There's been a lot of injuries and stuff. I think we can both agree Miles Joseph won't become the head coach with the way it imploded the last few weeks. Do you think he stays on the staff if he's not the guy, or?
I think if he doesn't get it, I think he leaves, and I don't fault him for that. I don't know. I mean, I thought he did a lot to deserve it. It's just the last three games were brutal. Tying LA Galaxy 3-3, losing 4-1 to Montreal, and then 3-1 to Houston. Houston is excusable. They're probably one of the best teams in the league right now. Montreal, really good at home, so you can kind of understand it. Really far travel. LA Galaxy, that one's just poor.
That one was, I think for me, that was when I got nervous as a fan, because our buddy was at that game, actually, two of our buddies, and they just cannot mark on corner kicks. It's unbelievable. It's been a thing for the Timbers like the past 7 years, I feel like.
It's been terrible, and I think that goes hand in hand with not having a lights out like star center back, because when you think back to us having Ridgewell and Borchers, we were amazing defensively, and we didn't concede off set pieces. And a lot of it just came down to their organization and holding guys accountable. And now it seems like when you had like the robot in goal of Ivasic, who didn't talk at all, he probably saw people who were open and just like refused to say anything. And then you have like Laris Mabiala, who's just doing like
open player.
You got Laris Mabiala who's doing TikTok dances and scoring own goals. You got Zach McGraw, who's all right. He's okay.
Everybody says he's like the best defender by far on the team. I don't see it, dude. He makes good plays, but
I'll say we look better with him on the field than we don't, because we don't have a good alternative.
That's true,
but he's not an amazing defender by any means.
The amount of times he gets burned and he's got Mabiala syndrome, I feel like. Not as bad yet.
There's a reason why he picked Canada over the US, and it's because he's in their B team. Like, he's their B team center back versus like he's not anywhere near the potential of getting anywhere like near the US team. So like he chose Canada because he's not at the quality. I don't think has the quality to be a star MLS center back. I don't know. And then you have Mabiala, like I already said, and then Zuparic, who's okay. I don't think he's amazing. I think he's slow. Araujo, who's
not really done anything yet.
We haven't really seen much. And then Eric Miller.
No, that's not bad, actually. You bring that one up. It's like, okay, I see what you're working with. No, I think Portland...
I think we just got to do a back four of all center backs and not worry about having overlapping outside backs and just see what happens. Center backs, just play like we're in Liga MX. Have 4 defenders that stay and just a D mid ahead of them. You just keep 5 guys in your half the whole time, the other 5 in the other half. No midfield. You just boot the ball up and see what happens.
Like FC Juarez versus Austin, pretty much.
Basically. Might work out for us. I don't know.
New starting goalkeeper who's not like a number 2 somewhere else that wins the job and does okay. New goalkeeper, new center back, a real right back, I think. I love Mosquera, but he's just a liability.
Would you rather have Bravo or Mosquera on the field if you had to do one or the other? I think Mosquera is better going forward than Bravo.
You're definitely right, but I don't know. That's tricky because Bravo's first couple of years, he felt like he would do the same thing, but instead of just leaving a guy unmarked, he would just like hack him in the box for like a free penalty kick. So
I also think Mosquera is pretty young, and I would rather build his stock and sell him on.
That's the thing. I can see Bravo sticking around for like a career here, whereas
Mosquera I could see us selling and getting some money for. Especially if we develop him as a winger rather than an outside back, I think you'd get more money.
I'd love to see a 3-5-2 with either of them, but I feel like
the problem is then you have 3 crap center backs on the field all at once rather than just 2.
If we get one, a better one, I don't know, you can really captain it and shore it up. Maybe next year's the year Chara regresses, though. We don't know.
That's never going to happen.
And in the 3-5-2, I feel like Evander would either be doing too much defensive capabilities, or when he's a number 10, he doesn't.
You could do 2 D mids behind him and have him float beneath 2 strikers. We don't really have any guys that are like absolute wingers on the team other than that new signing, Anthony.
Yeah.
Because you could play a top 2 of Felipe Mora and Santi Moreno or, something like that with Evander below.
I'd rather even put Moreno at that spot, and I don't know. I probably have a different feeling about Evander than you. So we'll move on though. Houston.
I'm looking at free agents that the Timbers could pick up this next season. How would you feel if we picked up Jonathan Mensah from San Jose?
Is he really a free agent? He just went over to San Jose.
MLS says top free agents for 2024. You got Kellen Acosta, Gustavo Bo, Stefan Fry, Julian Gressel, surprisingly. Kai Kamara, Lodero, Jonathan Mensah.
Lodero would be hilarious just for the banter.
Darlington Nagbe.
Dude, if Caleb Porter comes back, you already know Nagbe would be on that first plane back to Portland.
If I was the Timbers, I would be absolutely calling Jonathan Mensah. You got Diego Palacios from LAFC. He's a free agent. He's a left back, but still more depth. We don't really have a backup left back. Miles Robinson, free agent. Seems more like he's geared for a move away. Kai Wagner's leaving. Carlos Vela's a free agent. Diego Rubio. A lot of big names out there, but I think Jonathan Mensah is a solid shout. Timbers should pick up.
I would absolutely love that. However,
I don't think it's going to happen.
Wouldn't surprise me if when he went to San Jose, they kind of had like a gentleman's agreement or something like that. I know I've heard a lot of similar. That happens in the NBA a lot.
Timbers are going to go to Paraguayan Premier League and pick up some guy.
Some South American guy, or like some guy who played like a year or two in Turkey in the top flight. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that anymore. San Jose hosted Austin. It was a 1-1 draw, and San Jose squeaks into the playoffs after, a few years of disaster. First year in the Luchi Gonzalez era, they're in a wild card spot. So I think it's a great accomplishment. They started out lights out. This last 10 weeks, however, they pretty much only draw games. So I'm not too convinced they'll go on a big run, but I think a solid first year to build in the right direction, if that makes sense.
And who other than Christian Espinoza to bag the goal for them in this game? He has been amazing for them this season.
But is he as good as who's an Atlanta United equivalent winger?
So I feel like he had a good shout for one of those end of season awards, but he's not going to be there because his team isn't high enough. But I mean, how many goals and assists did he get this year? I know he was up there.
I think like a lot of other things, he cooled down a bit.
Got 13 goals, 8 assists.
That's a great year, though.
So he contributed to like 60-some% of their total goals this year were a direct result of him. And then you look at his underlying stats. Top 8% in shot creating actions, top 3% in expected assists, top 10% for non-penalty expected goals and expected assists. So like right up there is like one of the top players in the league. So I think he deserves a shout and a little bit of recognition at the end of the season here. But yeah, I don't know. San Jose squeak into the playoffs. I don't think they're going to make it very far, honestly.
Same here. Pretty intriguing matchup, actually. St. Louis hosting Seattle. St. Louis obviously wrapped up the top spot. Seattle clinches second, though, and a 2-0 away victory. Rusnak scores and a Tim Parker own goal. And, we talked about Seattle kind of being mid for a while, and I don't know, even in this year where it feels like they're not that great, by the end of the season, they're in second place, kind of quietly, I would even say. And the formula seems pretty straightforward to me. When Rui Diaz was the starter or a Bear, things weren't happening. When Jordan Morris and Leo Chu are starting on Morris up top, Chu on the wing, now they have Roldanbach. Like, this is a good team.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about at the beginning of the season. They're a good team. They're just old. They're an old team. So it's like they're right at the end of an era. But yeah, I agree. I mean, when they start some of those guys up top that, are younger and a little bit hungrier and can kind of do the hard yards, they look a lot better. But I don't know. St. Louis seeming to kind of cool down a little bit towards the end of the season, of course. But solid result for Seattle to hold on to that second place spot, putting them into a good place where they can play against FC Dallas in the first round of the playoffs.
Which means me and Chase are going to be FC Dallas supporters for this round of the playoffs.
Let's go, Dallas.
Come on, you boys and hoops. Anyway, last game, wrapping it up here. Vancouver hosting LAFC, a 1-1 draw. Ali Ahmed and Dennis Bouanga trade goals for each squad.
I was really hoping for a more exciting game here because Vancouver didn't have really anything else to play for. They were kind of locked in where they were at. Not much was going to happen. They couldn't go down any further. I was really hoping Vancouver was just going to throw everything at them and just like try and rack up goals. But, 1-1 draw. Super exciting.
Prediction game for us, actually, which we'll mention the other ones here, but I said LAFC winning 3-2. You said 2-1 LAFC. Both wrong, obviously. Our other ones was New York City and Chicago. I said 1-1 draw. I was wrong. You said 3-1 New York City win. You got the score wrong, but the result right. And then SKC versus Minnesota. We both saw a draw. Neither happened, obviously. So you got a point.
1 point.
One whole point, which means end of the regular season, points total like we said, 3 points for correct result and correct score, 1 point for the right result, no score. 68 points for me, 54 for Chase. Gearing into the playoffs, though. Anything can happen.
I'm squeaking into the playoffs. I'm going for that dream run.
I
didn't want to win in the regular season.
You want to make it interesting?
MLS fan.
Do it like double or nothing for points wise?
No.
He's going to say no, but watch, like, he'll actually just get a dream bracket or something like that and end up, like, crushing me if he would have done that.
How about we do our MLS bracket, and if if we pick the team that wins, it's like plus 10 points. Like, we pick our bracket before the playoffs start. Say I pick Houston to win the whole thing, and Houston wins the whole thing, I get plus 10 points. And same with you for whatever team you pick.
What about if I get MLS Assistant Referee of the Year correctly, Cam Blanchard?
I'm going Ian McCackney or McCarthy or whatever his name was. Ian McKay or something like that. Anyways.
It's going to wrap it up. Do you want to...
We got a couple predictions for these midweek games we could run through real quick.
The wild card ones.
We got the wild card games coming up. Eastern Conference wild card game. We got the New York Red Bulls hosting Charlotte FC.
Red Bull Arena goes pretty hard, actually, on a playoff atmosphere. These are probably like the two lowest opinion teams I have in the entire playoffs. Charlotte is riding a lot of momentum, I will say, but
they're also away.
I think 0-0 and Red Bulls win on penalties.
That's very uneventful because I said 1-1 and Red Bulls win on penalties.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, you put them in there, didn't you?
Yeah, I put 1-1 Red Bulls win on penalties. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a very high scoring game. And I think, yeah, similar to what you said, I think it's going to end a tie. Red Bulls pull it out because of their crowd. SKC versus San Jose. SKC's hosting this game. We know what kind of atmosphere they can put together in a playoff. Until Sebastian Blanco just hushes the crowd.
They're much more happy days. I wish we did this like something like this back then.
When the Timbers were competing.
And losing finals. But making finals.
But we got SKC hosting San Jose to see who will move on to play St. Louis. Should be said that New York and Charlotte, whoever wins that, plays against Cincy. Who do you got for SKC and San Jose?
I don't want to copy you, but I think SKC wins easily. I'm going 4-1 SKC.
SKC 4-1.
I think San Jose gets blown out here.
I would agree. I went with 2-0 SKC on the road. San Jose hasn't been that great this year. They've been struggling to find goals. I can't see them putting up much. SKC kind of rounding into form at the right time, and they're really good at home. I don't see them going much farther than winning this play-in game, though.
Polito brace, had a Johnny Russell strike, and then Eric Tomey, Remy Walter, Gadi Kinda, Willie Agata. They got some good pieces, whereas I think San Jose, you neutralize Christian Espinoza, and you've won the game.
Don't forget about Jabo.
Jabo's great, but I don't think he's the guy who's going to take on the game on his own.
You know what I will say about San Jose? Jeremy Ebobisse, despite his size, one of the best aerial strikers in the league. If you give up set pieces in a playoff game, he's a big game player. I could see him pulling up some nice headers.
I definitely don't think he's a big game player, but...
What, because he didn't win us a MLS Cup when he was 20?
Well... Not only did he not win us, he missed an open look in the box on a header, and then...
All right, well, that's been everything from us today, guys. Thank you all for listening.
Michael Parkhurst ate his lunch and said Josef Martinez threw on goal because Ebobisse tried to dribble through him.
I still think that was a foul.
Like our friend on Pro Clubs at the halfway line.
He wasn't dribbling through. He was receiving the ball. Michael Parkhurst came through his back to win it off of him.
Dude, you let Michael Parkhurst's body Michael Parkhurst looks like a guy who does spray paint art graffiti in downtown Venice Beach. Can you just picture that guy with a backwards hat just tagging a brick wall or something.
No way.
That guy's not an athlete. I mean, he's got a solid career. I actually really like Michael Parker.
I was gonna say that's an MLS legend right there. That guy.
He's such a normal looking guy, though.
Yeah, he looks like a guy who would like take you on a drive through his small town and be like pointing out like the murals or like some like little thing, like as if it's like this great like wonder of the world.
That's what I'm talking about, man. And good dude, great guy. I mean, part of some solid MLS teams. The Revolution back in the early 2000s when they were making MLS Cups. Went to Columbus Crew MLS Cup in 2015. Was a part of that great squad. Won the MLS Cup with Atlanta.
Michael Parkhurst deserves no disrespect on this podcast. Absolute legend of the game. But you know who may be following in his footsteps one day? Keegan Hughes.
I thought you were going to say Tim Parker.
Keegan Hughes, just starting his career. He might be on there one day. He might be at that level. He might reach that level.
The next Dave Romney.
Anyways.
Episode 36.
Thank you all for listening. That was episode 36. Follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you call that platform.
MLS Net Boys.
Leave us
X.
On X? Oh, that's true. Just MLS Net Boys, not MLS Net Boys Show. Leave us a review. Send us an email. Please, somebody interact with us. Starting to feel like the weird kid in the cafeteria.
What if that's our listener base, dude? You just insulted.
Then interact with us so we can interact with you.
you just insulted our core demographic, probably.
Those 2 listeners in Belgium.
What if it's just like random 45-year-old woman? It's like the complete opposite.
The exact opposite of what we've like expected our audience would be. Anyways, thank you all for listening. As always, Keegan Hughes, come on the show.